Hi, this is Bob Scully, and welcome to another edition of The World Show, Entrepreneurs, the Dobson Series. Our guest this week has won Entrepreneur of the Year twice. You don't see that very often. And he's known as the Mr. Fix-It of the venture capital world, and that he certainly is. He can take your company when it's in the ditch, about to sink out of sight irretrievably into the mud, and pull it out. He'll fly off the cliff and sail under your company before it crashes on the rocks below. He can work all kinds of magic on very troubled organizations, diagnosis, execution, repair, and bringing them back to health. He's known far and wide around the world for that kind of very rare talent. And yet, despite all that, he has steadfastly refused to take advantage of financial engineering and all its lucrative derivatives. He doesn't touch that kind of thing. It holds no interest for him. His values are strong. And those very same values have led him to start with his wife a foundation built around hidden angels. I won't say any more about that. Let's let Bud Kirchner tell the story himself. Here he is. Bud Kirchner, winning Entrepreneur of the Year is a big deal. You can wear it as a badge of honor for years and years. It's like winning Wimbledon. But generally, unlike Wimbledon, you win it once. And you are the Bjorn Borg of this thing, because, or the Roger Federer, because you've won it twice in a row. Let's talk about that. How did that happen?
Well, it was quite a while ago now, but what I do remember about it is that really each of the awards recognized one of the two things that are most important to me in business. The first was for building a world-class company. The second was for fixing a world-class company. And the reality is those are the two aspects of business that I've devoted my career to. So to have a recognition related to each of them was pretty important to me. And
Bjorn Borg went for 5. You're not, are you thinking of that?
No, I'm closer to retiring than I am to going for number 5.
And you're known as the, you say fix, and you're known, I saw in the research, the Mr. Fix-It of the venture capital world. You will take a mess and try to deliver it back to its shareholders, or new shareholders, in working shape. It's called a workout, usually. It's very different from hedge funds or just venture capitalists who just want to sell out when something grows.
Right.
It's kind of messy, isn't it? It's hard.
Well, it's hard, but the reality is that I learned those skills by helping to build companies from the grassroots up. And so once you know what makes a good company, it's relatively straightforward to put it back on track once it gets off track. So we have a fairly disciplined approach, and we go into these situations. It's a kind of work that's in fairly high demand because almost every company goes off track at some point. We tend to think of it as a stigma, but the reality is, for small and medium enterprise, if you're working as aggressively as you can to build something from nothing, inevitably you are going to go off track. It's part of the process. And so we're pretty proud of the fact that we've got a reputation of being able to put those companies back on track and taking them into another success story. Back to the Entrepreneur of the Year award, the company there that I fixed, we actually went on to, at the same time we were fixing that company, 100 competitors went bankrupt, and when we finished, for the next 5 years, we were in the top 5 companies in the country for revenue and shareholder value creation.
That the others went bankrupt tells you it was a troubled sector,
yes,
right there.
That's right.
What sector was it?
That sector was aquaculture.
Aquaculture, in other words, like hydroponic and.
Well, it's aquaculture in the general sense is growing fish under intensive culture. Okay. Yeah. It can be shellfish, it can be finfish. The bankrupt company we started with was a finfish company. When we finished, we were in several different species, and we had done acquisitions around the world. So you inject capital. You don't just fix. You really have to bring in new parts and new equipment, in a sense, meaning capital. Well, if you think about making a company successful, it's a little bit like a barrel with one stave is inevitably shorter than the others, and that's where the water runs out. So to fix a company, you start with fixing that first stave, and that might be the need for capital, it might be the need for more disciplined management, it might be the need for a more aggressive marketing campaign, access to international markets. So the fixing of the company is all about first things first, dealing with the first stave that's short, then another one becomes short, and eventually you've built a successful company.
And you're a little bit, I guess, like the doctor on the battlefield doing triage. You're solicited a lot. You have to decide if it's fixable, and that's a tough decision. How do you make that? Is it gut feel or analysis? You come in and say, no, I'm not going to touch that one, I can't do it. This one I can do. How do you make that determination?
Well, I think probably on the back of a 40-year career, there's a lot of pattern recognition. I can look at a company, I can get a pretty good sense of whether there's the right ingredients there and they've just been sort of deployed inappropriately, or whether or not it's a flawed business model, or the fundamental issue is there a value proposition that the market actually needs?
And so how important are people there, the quality, because I noticed in the research it comes back a lot, but flawed business model can be the market. Does it happen that you have great people in a lousy business model and you have to turn them down?
Well, if you have great people, I'd be inclined to take on great people no matter what the business model, because really it's always about business. It's analogous to the real estate saying about location, location, location. Small and medium enterprises about people, people, people.
And when you come in, do you come in with a team that will sit there and sort of run it for a few months? Do you have a pattern there, a method?
Well, if we're dealing with what we would call a distressed or a company that's off track, the first thing we'll do is essentially an assessment. We'll determine what things are not working and which things are not working. We'll determine what the potential is for the company in the marketplace. We then formulate a plan. We build a plan that we think addresses all the needs of the company and dovetails better with the marketplace. Then we'll assemble a team amongst our people to go into the company. And then as quickly as we can, we will phase out of that company and bring in more permanent management. Because again, like an emergency room doctor, we're at our best in those acute situations. When we're in a distressed situation, when we're helping to build a company from the grassroots up, then we take a completely different approach, but the priorities remain the same.
And as I read a lot of the things you've done, I kept thinking of, this is a different story altogether, but Buffett has often made a lot of money on obscure little companies that he's taken care of, See's Candy and the Furniture Mart in Omaha with that lovely old lady who died at 90. But he kept them. Yep. He kind of fell in love with them, but they were good, and he worked hard at them. Yep. Do you ever fall in love enough that you keep it in your portfolio?
Well, we would inevitably keep an ownership interest. It's just our management team would tend to move on and put in a more permanent management team. So for sure, if we put a company back on its feet, by then we know it so well, we've become so personally involved in its success that we would always maintain an interest, an economic interest in that company.
Well, would you own 100% of it?
Rarely would we own 100% of any company because we're a small group and it's important to be somewhat diversified. So generally, our ownership interest in our asset management business, for example, would be somewhere between 10 and 50%.
And you're not, in venture capital, there's always this kind of, this be-all and end-all, which is the exit strategy, where they're going to make a pile, and people are always looking at the clock saying, when's our exit strategy? But that's usually with companies that they want to take public and so on. I don't think this process is like that.
Well, there's always an exit component because companies inevitably need someone to be able to move on. It could be someone wants to retire. It could be an estate that needs to be settled. Companies rarely go on generation after generation with the same ownership. There's usually some transition. We've actually, one of the groups that we have within our group, our overall group, is dedicated to helping companies do these kind of transactions, to transition from one owner to another. Not because we're hell-bent to get out of deals, but because we recognize that ownership interest changes, people's priorities change, people get older, situations change.